I tell you, Charles, something new each week. How
Way
are
to
you?
go.
That was a firm handshake. I've done a lot to clear up the space over here. Oh, people can't see it anymore because of that. Well, Charles, sounds really quiet in here.
It's so quiet I can't even hear myself.
You can't even hear yourself think.
Very well done, Jason, and hats off to the art department. I mean, this poster, at this stage, it's really tough for me to even contemplate trying to winnow down to the 3 best or 5 best or 10 best. There are so many fantastic posters in here. We really should spend a few minutes on, or seconds anyway, talking about the composition of this.
Sure.
Jason, I think you might take us through the different
Absolutely.
people.
Well, I tell you, Charles, this is another one of these films that surprisingly I have not seen, but it was a good choice for a poster because there's just so many, that's interesting. There we go. So many expendable individuals. I think the idea is, again, having not seen the film, that these are all people who have in some way served the goals, the needs, the crooked doings of the Clintons, and it may soon be time for them to all discover how expendable they are. I didn't put them in any particular chopping block order or anything like that, but we've got the feckless Christopher Ray. I'm going to go right out and say this guy's evil, Eric Holder. I don't like him at all. And he's a big problem. Loretta Lynch. We've got a very startled-looking Robert Mueller, B-Rock, of course. And again, people might be surprised to hear us say this, but again, I think that the totality of your research, Charles, indicates that Obama has been a pawn of the Clintons.
I think that's absolutely the case. I mean, and once we go back into the history to understand it, we freeze on Bill for a second. There he is with a Lewinsky-laden cigar. And
rolled on the thighs of virgins, Charles.
Right. And in no way, I mean, that cross around his neck is probably, white hot eating into his torso. But when we think about the implausible journey Bill Clinton had out of Arkansas into being president of the United States at a very young age, mid-40s, and the willingness that I believe he and his team showed to not just circumvent the law, not just flout the law, but to operate the White House, I think history will show, as a criminal enterprise, where his thugs were in different branches, whether they were at the top or in medium level but important roles. They were in a position to, for example, ferret out FBI files on rivals and potential enemies, to destroy information that might have been harmful to the Clintons while he was in the White House, to put his people in as judges and U.S. attorneys and other ways, and to play from the inside as President of the United States, to play a dirty game that continued during the George W. Bush presidency. And I think, as you rightly say, I think that Barack Obama felt that he was going to win the presidency fair and square. He didn't understand who he was up against, that they had files on him and they had leverage points against him. And so there's a long list of people who've been protecting Bill Clinton until now. We've got the idiot, dopey James Comey. Yeah. We have, turns out, man for all seasons, Eric Hansen, if this plays out the way it may play out, is going to be, his name will have more than an asterisk associated with it. His name and the names of the others at BKD, which is an accounting firm on life support, in my view, will really be poured over, and BKD's role in this is going to be poured over for generations by accountants who take the profession seriously. We've talked about this in the past, Jason, but I don't know if you remember that with the legal profession, you can claim privilege, you can claim that that this information shouldn't be revealed for whatever reason, but in the accounting profession, there is no such privilege. So when you start going after an accounting firm for its role as Arthur Andersen, that's okay, as Arthur Andersen blew up, when you start going after a firm knowingly performing incredibly shoddy work that positioned a bunch of people in the eyes of the public to, instead of being just a bunch of crooks collecting money and cashing the checks, as a charity. When you come to realize that BKD, that firm, its imprimatur on the financial statements, its continued involvement from 2002 all the way to 2012, 13, and then in the restatements that followed, the fact that BKD has not yet pulled its financial statements, even as the financial statements they created for the fake set of Clinton charities. When you remember that during this long period, more than a decade, the Clintons and people around them have solicited billions of dollars in the name of a charity that didn't exist. And this accounting firm didn't have the guts to stand up and say, hey, wait a minute, we're not going to, this is ridiculous. So
what tiger among us will
right, exactly.
stand and face the music?
Right. So this guy, Hansen, he made his call. He had a chance, and we gave him fair warning. He had a chance to be a hero and stand up for the accounting profession. Instead, he's a goat. He's a dead goat. Frankly.
Well, it's a nice beret, though.
It is. It's a snappy. Did you get that in France?
That was part of the poster.
Oh, I see.
And then we've got, of course, McCabe.
Yeah, he looks like a Geritol ad.
It looks like an eyebrow ad. And then this guy might be the least recognizable, but this is your favorite Twitter dope, Angel Urania.
Where's this fruit?
I left the guy's ear there who was beneath him. Oh, and I forgot the fruit hat. Yeah, sorry about that.
That's
Charles.
okay. He probably feels naked without the fruit hat. And
Right.
then you have the goblin in chief, Rat Rodenstein, who I believe we had him correctly characterized from the very beginning. We were suspicious about him, and I remain unconvinced that he was ever converted into being a decent human being. Perhaps he's cooperating with Durham and the other investigations that are going on around the world. But where we are today on March 1st, 2020 is approximately 29, 30 days away from Bill Barr, testifying in Congress and before the Judiciary Committee. And
Testifying about what?
He's agreed to come forward and subject himself to questions over how he's running the Office of Attorney General and the Justice Department, et cetera. And I don't believe that he would have consented to such an appearance without having thought through in his own mind how these investigations are going and whether there might be something already in the public domain to which he could react. Because he strikes me in his later life anyway to be a very careful guy. And he was quoted, he was asked how long was this investigation into the investigators going to take, and he said that it would take until, I think he said spring, well, March 21st is spring.
Sounds like a kitchen contractor. It's like, 2 weeks.
Yeah, just give me 50% up front. Right, exactly. But a wonderful job, though, with the poster, and really the Clintons, we're going to talk about this at length in the slides, but the Clintons face a very serious set of decision points right now. They have Biden just won in South Carolina.
I don't believe that, but...
Well, it seems that he won, but I don't think he's a credible candidate. Now you've got...
Rigged in his favor, let's call it.
Yeah, well, so we have Bernie, we have Biden, we have Bloomberg with all his bucks, the Bloomberg bucks, and... there's a limited amount of time now for Hillary to stand up or try not to fall down and be counted in the 2020 stakes for presidency. So I think you're going to see major cross-currents in coming days, weeks, between those who would like to see Hillary and the Clintons dead, buried, and gone, with the Clintons themselves who very much would like to move back into the White House, is my bet, especially if they didn't have to do any work.
Right. Well, we'll have to see what happens in that regard, Charles. I know we've got kind of a lot of material to cover today, and you've prepared another one of your presentations for us. You know, Charles, a lot of people have been emailing me that they were surprised that the CEO of Disney, Bob Iger, stepped down. The co-CEO of Salesforce also stepped down, so that's interesting. A lot of people were curious. I get some different angles on this stuff because I read Variety and Hollywood Reporter, some of these entertainment magazines that I used to subscribe to, and everybody knows that Disney. You and I discussed that Disney owns Hulu,
Right.
which is putting out this Hillary Clinton miniseries, and Disney has recently had huge success with their Disney Plus service that's going to challenge Netflix. And from an investment standpoint, obviously Netflix is the big player for streaming. So people are looking at this, and Disney has come under scrutiny. I don't know if this had anything to do with Bob Iger leaving, but this most popular show that they have on Disney Plus is this thing. I know you're not a big Star Wars fan, Charles, but they've got this show, The Mandalorian. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's all about this Mandalorian bounty hunter who, this was what Boba Fett, the very popular Boba Fett character, was a Mandalorian bounty hunter. And the problem that it's come under is that a lot of people have accused Disney of, a lack of diversity. So they're coming out with a new show, The Lesbian DeLorean. And that'll be, featuring a more diverse cast, and I think people will really like that. It should help Disney get back on track.
Oh, boy.
So there you go, Charles.
Oh, my God.
And with that,
okay.
can transition to the slides.
So this is, I think, our 213th or 14th broadcast.
Should we address that?
You can?
There was a bit, and also I want to thank 4K CD to me, who has just now obviously mastered the super chat on Crowdsource the Truth too. $20 super chat. Thank you, 4K
Thank you very much.
CD. So what's happened is I was going through, and I'm going to make this book of the covers, the images, and all that, taking a lot of time, and I've gone through each and every one of the graphics and collected them all, and I discovered that it seemed there was one episode that hadn't been added to the playlist. So I've added it. You have an amazing memory because I told you what the episode was, and I already can't remember which one it was. But people can go on YouTube to the Jason Goodman YouTube channel, and we've assembled all the episodes of Sunday with Charles and Charles Ortel is Closing in this handy Sunday with Charles playlist. The playlist itself has almost 37,000 views. There are 212 videos in it now, unless I accidentally deleted one. I don't think so. I'll double check it again. But today should be our 213th episode, and people can go back to any of these, Charles, and when you click on it, it's going to bring you right to that video. And just below each of the videos is a standard description box there. Tells you a bit about the content of the video, and usually you're going to see this little show more text. It might not be obvious to everyone that you can click on that. It's going to reveal all of the sponsorship links where people can support Crowdsource the Truth, help us keep the shows coming. And for almost every single show, we've got this download Charles's presentation link. When you click it, it's going to take you right to the PDF document, which you can either read on screen or with this standard download icon. You can save it to your own computer, print it out, email it to friends, do whatever it is you might like to do with a PDF document.
Great.
Yeah. So enough of that.
Good. So we're now in this moment where the Clintons have been clinging to power. I mean, if you think about the way in which they arrived in the White House, going all the way back to 1993, in some ways, it was a bit of a miracle that they won, and they probably would not have won absent Ross Perot. Ross Perot, remember, took almost 20% of the vote.
I loved Ross Perot. I was sad when he died. It was just last year, I think.
And another thing. But
now, if you want to keep on slow dancing, cards and stuff. It was like, who is this guy?
but had he not run, George H.W. Bush would have won, I think. And anyways,
does it really matter? Isn't it true that Bill Clinton and George H.W. Bush are old school a-hole buddies?
Could be. But my point is that Bill arrived with Hillary in Washington, D.C. I'm not sure they expected to win. And the first thing they did, one of the first things they did is they fired all the sitting U.S. attorneys. And the reason for that, some argue, is they were concerned that the one in Little Rock was getting too close to the truth.
So they had to fire them all?
Right.
Why all? Why not
So
just
then
Little Rock?
you replace them with loyalists.
Got it.
You see? So you could go back to that period and you could say, I mean, you could even go into Arkansas, and there were scandals in Arkansas when he was governor. You could say that these people have been covering up messes they created themselves, or they and their cohorts created, for a long, long time. And now, even under a president who's difficult to control, if not impossible to control, the Clintons have been able to throw shade at President Trump since the night he won. I mean, they resisted. They had the recounts.
Won.
They had exactly. But then when it seemed he won, they had the resistance. They had the recount effort. The screw up the electoral college vote, and then it was Mueller. We've been through all the history, and now I think, though, what has happened to the Clintons is there are enough of the different scandals, and I mean, they love in their foundation to talk about the initiatives. So there are enough of our initiatives and the initiatives of friends and allies we have around the world. Enough of those initiatives have borne fruit and are making progress to a place now where there's not going to be an opportunity to protect all of the Clintons. It's just not going to happen. People have been talking to the authorities for months now, in my view, if not longer. There are very rich people who have a lot of money at stake here, Bill Gates and others like him, who are not going to, in the end, want to foot the bill for the Clintons. And if you look at the landscape of the Democratic Party, it's not like people are saying, gosh, I really wish Hillary Clinton were running. I mean, wouldn't it be fantastic to have her back in the White House? You know, it's not the way they're thinking.
I think there are some people who think that. The type of people who grab your cell phone when you're asking Bill Clinton what the hell he's doing selling pharmaceuticals through a charity.
Yeah, the zip code 114 in the West Village and a few other places. But I mean, there are a lot of zip codes in the country, and on balance, I don't think, we're all waiting for Hillary.
Waiting for her to die.
Well, so I think what could happen here is that the Clintons could make a last feverish push to get across the line and work with others to pin this fraud on other people. In other words, they can say, we were trying to do what's right. I've heard this argument before, actually, in 2015-16. You hear the chatter from the Clinton camp say, Bill doesn't care about money, and he's very disappointed in people like Doug Band and Ira Magaziner, and these accountants didn't fill out the paperwork properly, and our lawyers had it bad. I mean, all the excuses are going to start coming to the fore, and paying for this bill is going to be a costly exercise. I mean, this is, I think, for the people of this country, the good news is we're going to finally learn, once this is over, exactly what presidential records may have been destroyed by the Clintons. We're going to find, because there's a provenance, and everything that went into the National Archives and from the National Archives out to Little Rock, if you had real people studying this, you would be able to see the gaps and holes and the destruction of records that occurred as they left the White House when he was president out to the holding warehouse in Little Rock, if it was only in Little Rock, and then into the archives. We're going to figure out just whether or not records were destroyed or amended or whatever illegally. And with this team, I mean, with this pattern that we've seen going way back, only a fool would bet that there were no records destroyed. I mean, of course there were records destroyed. And they would have destroyed them in the guise of saying, well, we were the first presidency that worked in the internet age. How was I to know that an email was the only record? Well, this draft I destroyed, they're going to have all these excuses why whatever they did was not in contravention of the law.
So it just seems like the excuses don't matter because no one's even checking anything. I mean,
and then once you check to see whether there's a crime, the next step is to say, "Oh, it's a crime.
Statute of limitations is up."
Yeah, we can't prosecute that. No jury in Washington D.C. would ever convict Bill Clinton of anything.
That's probably true.
Well, maybe, which doesn't mean. I mean, why should the jury trial be in Washington D.C.?
Right. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah. So the question, I think, for the people at places like BKD, lawyers involved with this, trustees, major donors, in 2020, in March of 2020, do you really want to protect the Clintons? Knowing what we're going to tell you, what more we're going to tell you today, do you really want to invest, to burn good money in the defense of the indefensible? Is that something you really want to do? Well, we're going to hope to take you through some more arguments why you won't want to do that in today's show. And I think with that, Jason, we can go to the next summary. We jumped over the fact that later in the broadcast, we're going to be joined by the great Michael Smith, who admits in the broadcast where he was at the time of the interview, and I don't believe he's there now. But this is a gentleman I got to know back, I think, in 2015, who has done easily 60 or more pieces on this Clinton Foundation. He's a retired police detective. He's a media personality. He actually, turns out he won an Emmy for an international documentary on Somalia. Something I just got an email from him explaining that back and forth.
Oh, I saw that.
Yeah.
I didn't put two and two together. I didn't know what he was talking about.
So
we should also add, he's an extremely nice guy.
Oh, yeah, wonderful guy, and he's a media...
And we just recorded, yesterday or Friday? This was freshly done, and to accommodate his travel schedule and his time and all that sort of stuff. But people have heard Michael Smith on the show before, and we've shown his website many times. He's doing fantastic work.
That he is. And he brings, it's interesting, his first career, I think he was a business person and then also a police detective and a media personality. So he's done lots of different things, but he has experience putting people in jail.
Yes.
Which is, I think, something one ought to remember as we try and go through the records that exist concerning the degree to which the Clintons have solicited and received money from Australia on manifestly false pretenses.
What is this story he's got here?
I don't know.
We're going to have to dig into that. But Charles, I also want to thank Pam Ronning for utilizing Super Chat. It's a Super Chatterific day.
No, that's good.
That is good.
Good. So before we get into the bowels of the presentation, or the guts of the presentation, the approach we've been taking here, particularly for the new viewers and listeners, the approach we've been taking is to try to do something with this podcast. And now I guess it's on, what did you say, iTunes?
Yes, right. And you know what? What I'm trying to do, Charles, is to get it so that the starting of our video show coincides with the starting of the podcast. I now have to do it manually. So anyone who's listening on iTunes or Spreaker or Spotify or iHeartRadio or any of those channels that we're on right now, they missed the first few minutes because I hit start a little bit late. I'll fix it after the broadcast. But people can listen to us live now wherever they get podcasts. So I think even some car stereos can do that. And a lot of people have been asking me from the very beginning if I could do the show as a podcast as well. And I know that sounds easy, but it took a lot of doing. And it's still not fully complete the way I want it to be, but people are getting it on there, and it's a great way to listen to the show.
Thank you. So what we try to do here in this approach, going back now almost, it'll be in June, 3 years of this,
Wow.
Is to marry up Jason's considerable talent in Hollywood and with media, in presenting visually and audio-visually, I guess, the material that we have here with my experience presenting to boardrooms and big investors around the world, complex transactions, trying to make those transactions comprehensible and the kind of thing that you can understand and decide whether you want to do anything about it. So what we do here, in my background in doing this, was in the main talking about transactions which, whether they were done or not done, entailed substantial potential financial benefit or loss, and also entailed considerable legal risks. So it's a minefield that we had to tread very carefully. And in the public transactions that I was involved with, decades ago, every single one of them was a transaction where one or more lawsuits would have eventuated. So,
wow. That seems to be the way this channel is going.
but when you think about these matters, it's very useful to lay them out the way we've done, and now in these podcasts and audio broadcasts, but also with these pull down slide presentations that, with the advent of the internet and the cloud, allow you to look at, to your heart's content, millions, literally millions of pages of information if you were to pull all of the links on the more than 200 slide presentations that we've done and look at the source material. But we put it out to you in an organized fashion. May seem helter-skelter in the beginning, but it really isn't. We try to lay it all out there, bring you up to date with what events in the first, typically the third slide in, the most recent events of the week, what we consider to be important things going forward. Then we take one or more important prongs of analysis and really go into them in some depth, giving you a chance to appreciate yet another facet of what we believe to be the largest collection of unprosecuted charity frauds ever attempted in history. So all the information that we present here, most all of it is gleaned from the public domain. If you have comments or suggestions, please get to me on my website, or Jason and me through Twitter as well. Michael Smith's Twitter handle is there. And keep your comments, if you can, short. I promise I will not read more than 250 words of an initial email or whatever. I just don't have the time to do it. But as I get stuck into things, I've found that there's some incredibly helpful people, and thank you, you'll remain unnamed for the moment, out in the crowd who have not only come up with suggestions, but have instigated investigations around the world.
Yeah.
And are doggedly doing so, bringing these charity fraudsters eventually the justice they so richly deserve.
You're not even a dog owner, so that's even more impressive. Charles, I want to thank Jennifer Small for utilizing Super Chat. Thank you, Jennifer. It's been a great day for Super Chat, and David Von Kettering has noticed that the audio is perfect. I've solved the problem. That's the interesting thing about problems. While they're ongoing, they're problematic. But once you solve them, they seem to be solved. So I presume we're ready for the next slide.
Yes, sir.
There we go.
So there's an interesting story here, and I'm so squeamish I wouldn't even come close to trying to pretend that I'm a doctor. But I'm reminded in this news out in Gateway Pundit, it's important to remember that flu is a recurring thing. It's not like flu only happens once every 20. It happens every year. It's constant. And there's 7.6 billion people on the planet. So a certain percentage of us are going to get the flu.
Right.
Now the question is whether this coronavirus, is it something that is much more lethal than the ordinary flu? Does it have special features that we don't know about? Probably there are many, many unknowns. But this is an article, a sober article, which points out that there have been a lot more fatalities, frankly, from normal flu so far in Hong Kong than from coronavirus. So, I mean, yes, we need to be concerned, and I wish people, absent the coronavirus, were more concerned about basic cleanliness here in Manhattan. I mean, you go on the subway, and there are rats everywhere, and there are people, I don't even want to say what they're doing down in the barrels of the New York subway system or on the street corners today. So, yes, we should be concerned about cleanliness. Yes, we should feel sorry, frankly, for the too many people in the developing world that don't have clean water and clean toilets and electricity and all sorts of problems. But I think we should be a little bit more measured in the way we consider coronavirus and reactions to it. The health apparatus in the United States of America is far more robust than it is in virtually any place in Africa, in many places in Asia. And I think here in the United States of America, we're probably, we're not immune from potential problems, but I hope the damage will not be as profound as some suggest.
I'm not worried about getting sick, or let me rephrase that. I'm not worried about dying from coronavirus, but it does seem like it's going to disrupt economic stuff and factories and deliveries and all this. So we're sort of like locked in this thing, no matter what.
And I mean, there's certain things that I worry about the things that I can change.
Right.
The things that you can't really change, what's the point of worrying about it that much? I mean, you've got to try to protect yourself to the extent possible. But the one place I will tell you I don't want to go to try to worry about the coronavirus is North Korea. I mean, this is a novel approach they took here.
I think they have a great approach.
It's like, we want you to go into quarantine, and if you don't fix this problem, we're going to basically kill you.
Is that bad?
Well, I don't know. It might be good, North Korea, compared to having to live in North Korea.
We haven't really heard Donald Trump say much about North Korea lately, but at the same time, they haven't been bombing anything either. So I don't know. What do we think about North Korea these days?
I've got to believe North Korea is in deeper shit than it was before. I mean, you see the reports of people, scientific reports of the level of activity, industrial activity across China apparently is just imploded. People aren't leaving their homes, or factories aren't running. And if China is collapsing, then North Korea it's got to be even more of a hellhole than it previously was. I mean, there are these satellite maps that try to look at the degree to which people are using electricity and the heat generated in a country. And North Korea before all this was not looking too good. So,
well, I mean, they've obviously kept the hair gel factories open, because what is going on the top of this dude's head?
Yeah. and can you imagine, who do you think cuts his hair?
Gotta be nervous, right?
Right, exactly. You're going to make me look like a fool. I thought that's what you wanted.
It's already there.
Yeah. So I think a point on Afghanistan, we have apparently signed a preliminary peace deal with the Taliban, as Obama liked to call them.
That struck me as super odd, Charles, because I don't know that we've had a more Reagan-esque president, including Ronald Reagan himself, as we have Donald Trump. And Ronald Reagan, as you know, one thing he said that I remember from being a kid is that he will not negotiate with terrorists. And if there's someone he doesn't want to negotiate with, he'll just say they're a terrorist.
Yeah. So the best analysis I've seen of the situation in Afghanistan, as Obama might say, is you have to look at it. You can't look at the country as a whole. You've got to look at the problem being the folks who live in Kabul are the trader class, TRADER class, the merchant class, who like to stay there and who have been at odds with the itinerant class for centuries. So you start with an unstable. There's a geographic boundary around the country, but you look at the territory and you say, even if we weren't there, they'd be at war. Kabul versus the nomad groups. So the wisdom of going into Afghanistan the way we did in 2001 is something that I think is a fair subject to go back over, even though there's not much we can do about it at this stage. But it is fair to ask the question, why did it make sense to rush off and destabilize Afghanistan and give Saudi Arabia a pass for having sheltered 19 of the 20 hijackers? I mean, why do we right away say, oh, let's destabilize Afghanistan and give Saudi Arabia a pass?
What about Michael Moore's book that says that Osama bin Laden was in Iran?
It's not Michael Moore, isn't it? Is it Michael Moore?
It was.
Okay.
But, I mean, what about that?
Yeah, there are supposed experts who say it's impossible for Iran to have been harboring a Sunni terrorist group, and I don't believe that to be the case at all. I think that in that crazy part of the world,
screwing up America, they'll do whatever they need to do.
The enemy of my enemy is my friend. So, all I would say though is that after to think that we've been in this war now, this is the 20th year that we've been at war. Between our entry in World War II and the ultimate victory was 4.5 years or so. So to be in this country for 20 years fighting, so many of our brave young people killed, and even worse than being killed, frankly, maimed, mentally hurt. This was not a battle that was just pain-free for this country and even for people around Afghanistan as well. So when people urge this president to step into another war, or any president to step into another war, this is a place where the idiots like AOC who think that history doesn't matter need to go back and study the history of why it was the founders were so insistent that the House of Representatives would declare war. The founders understood the price tag of war. They had fought a war to get this country. And indeed, their ancestors had been involved in many bloody wars. And they understood that people will lurch a country into a war unless there's a very in-depth discussion about it. And there wasn't one in Afghanistan, frankly. It was a
rush.
It was a rush to retribution, and it was not well thought through.
Right.
And it wasn't well executed either. And the people who are so quick to criticize Donald Trump for waking up in the morning might be people who should go back and examine the run-up. Why did we end up in Afghanistan? Did we do enough to stop Osama bin Laden? Did we indeed create Osama bin Laden? I mean, we need to go back to understand why we are in the predicament we're in now. We've got to be honest with ourselves about the history and look at it as Americans, not as Republicans or Democrats, and just say, we have blown trillions of dollars a year, crushed lives, changed the landscape in different countries. Now we're going to be leaving or reducing our footprint in Afghanistan. Before we get into another war, we need to fess up and learn from our mistakes. So on a lighter topic, which there's a gentleman whose name, he's the author of this piece in the American Thinker, Bob Bishop, is a retired accountant who is a wonderful human being and has done a lot of work on a wide range of charities that present highly questionable financial statements and public filings. And one of them is this one that we've talked about, Operation Hope, or as I like to refer to it, Operation Dope. And we have the oddity that this fellow, Phil Griffin, who's very well known as the CEO of MSNBC, has been quite willing in his professional capacity as head of the network to savage Donald Trump for Donald Trump's role in the Trump Foundation and Trump University relentlessly across multiple anchors and shows, tirelessly telling everybody that the Trump family doesn't deserve to be in the charity business, when Phil Griffin is on the board of Operation Hope, and when MSNBC and CNBC have lent a platform to this John Hope Bryant, the supposed founder of Operation Hope, to swan around, to strut around as if what he's doing is benefiting people, when, as we've documented in prior broadcasts, John Hope Bryant's original charity was chartered to operate in Los Angeles. And the paper trail that we've been able to see so far is littered with diabolically bad, defective filings, even as the guy has been soliciting all kinds of money, using the internet, using telephone, using the mail across state lines, as his financial filings have either not been out there, though they should have been, or been out there false and materially misleading. And I don't think you should get a pass for this just because you might be from a humble background. And I don't think you should be held to a different standard. I don't think it should be that, well, if you're going to go take victory laps, his bio talks about having won hundreds of awards. And if you're going to brag about the good things that you're supposedly doing as a venture philanthropist, you better not be lying about it. And as far as we can tell, this man is a stone cold liar.
Lying and cheating.
That's
cheating.
The lion
and cheaters.
The Lion and Cheating Initiative. So I'm hopeful, and we're seeing signs. If you check out Operation Hope's website, what you see are signs that the money behind Operation Hope has, I think, mostly because of Bob's work, but in part because of our broadcasts, I think some lawyers have started to take a look at the filings and have started to conclude the obvious here, that John Hope Bryant's story just doesn't add up.
Nice.
And as the authorities dive into it, they're going to be looking to sue people
Ooh.
And so they're going to be looking to sue people who have deep pockets. And MSNBC is owned by Comcast, which is a multi-billion-dollar operation. On the board of Comcast are some pretty experienced legal types and people who are highly experienced with charity laws. So they will understand that Operation Hope, which is supposed to be a public charity, i.e. not controlled by a family, cannot be a vehicle, as it seems to have been, for John Hope Bryant to pay himself excessively and live the lifestyle of a plutocrat on the basis of his contributions to a charity.
Charles, we've got Hytham G asking us via Super Chat. Thank you for that, Hytham G. Is there a relation between Kyle Griffin, the MSNBC producer, and Phil Griffin? Because I really hate that guy when he tweets stupid things.
I don't know. I don't know.
It's a good question.
That's a good question, though.
We'll have to check that out.
So on what I think should be the encouraging news front, if we hit this link here to the Justice Department, what we see is that, remember there was the Panama Papers investigation.
Oh, yeah.
We see
Mossack Fonseca.
Right. We're seeing now signs that here's the Southern District of New York, which is a very powerful district because it has lawyers in it. It's a big office, but it has lawyers in it with forensic tools and experience to understand complex financial frauds. Are you thinking about that, Bill and Hillary Clinton? Complex financial frauds. What sort of a U.S. Attorney's Office wouldn't you want to be looking into a complex financial fraud? That would be the U.S. District, the Southern District in New York. Now, I don't know whether the Southern District is looking into the Clinton Foundation, but here's a case of a 75-year-old guy who now faces, death in prison for. You can see it's handled by the office's Complex Frauds and Cybercrime Unit and Money Laundering. Now that you're done with this case, boys and girls, Clinton Foundation. I turn your attention. These people have done a lot of good. And then you got the money laundering and asset recovery section. These are sections that I think should be training their gun sights on the multiplicity of Clinton charities that have been operating since October 1997. And so here we see an example of when our Justice Department wants to do something about a very complex matter, they can. Now, on my favorite subject, General Electric, the stock market, as we know, has had one hell of a plunge in the last 7 or 8 days, and the trading days, that is to say, and GE has really been hammered. This is an old article, February 25th, but it's been hammered. And I took a look at their annual report, which is called a 10K, and it's really disgraceful. I mean, you think about this company, which at its peak, it really was a phenomenally powerful company that had a great suite of businesses, most of whom were either number 1 or 2 in their world market. Now you look at the thing, the only thing it seems to know how to do is have declining revenues, make losses.
It's going up.
No, you got to check to the date.
Oh. See, I'm not a sophisticated investor, Charles.
That's right.
Today it's doing great.
Yeah.
But if we take it back, not so good.
Not so good. No, remember, when I first pounced on this, GE stock, and it hasn't split, stock was at 40 in 2007, right? And now you're down at 10. The market has gone up a little bit since 2007. So this is, to me, this is not just, we had a bad run. I mean, this is a bunch of executives and advisors and lawyers and people who've been milking the long-suffering pensioners who still don't have enough assets, I think, in the pension fund of GE to pay out the pension claims, been milking the communities, milking all kinds of people. These are executives who should not be allowed, and maybe the laws are written so they will get away with this. They've paid themselves, in Jeff Immelt's case, the former CEO and the guy who came after him, paid themselves $20 million a year each. Flew around. Immelt ultimately got bounced out of GE for flying around the world with a 2 Boeing business jets in case the other one, his had
Would
a
fly with him,
Yeah.
both jets? That's crazy.
It's absurd. I mean, it's absurd. And my experience with them in the 90s, working
Is
for a
it like
couple.
$20,000 an hour to operate a jet?
I don't know, much more. I have no clue. But all in for with all the attendant overhead, I've got no clue. But the point is that we can't have the ultimate resolution of the GE matter be, oh well, people made some mistakes and the thing goes bankrupt. And there has to be business schools and law schools and accounting professors have to learn from this and say, we can't give these profit-seeking top guys just carte blanche when to manufacture a story that sounds like things are doing well, pay themselves well. Then when it turns out that maybe they were making most of that stuff up, then let it take 6, 7, 10 years, and then it's too complicated to think about. Let's just walk away. There has to be much tougher oversight of complex multinational operations, whether they be for-profit in the case of GE or not-for-profit in the case of the Clinton Foundation. It can't be, this is so complicated, nobody should understand it. Because the second you allow those type of things to operate, it's a prescription for the fraudsters.
We're giving them carte blanche, Charles.
Exactly.
Remember that?
I do.
It seems to have gone away. I don't think you can get that credit card anymore.
No, you can't.
Diners Club, carte blanche. Good ads, but...
And Rodney Dangerfield was good too. So this is a story, an interesting story, terrible and interesting at the same time.
Oops.
There's the one above it. No, yeah. There's a football player, I hadn't heard of him, called, I think his name is Jack Brewer. And yeah, Jack Brewer. And he went to the White House. There was a White House summit. It was Black History Month last month. And he was effusive in his praise for Donald Trump. And he said that he regards, this is a black person, he regards Donald Trump as the first black president. And well, this is what he said. And he what he meant is that Donald Trump had really, and his team had gotten to try to figure out what the federal government can do to improve opportunities for minorities of not just African Americans, but minorities in this country. And he was praising Donald Trump, not just for the economic moves, but also for the moves on prison reform and sentencing reform and things like that. And here's this hack on CNN immediately call Jack Brewer out, say he's an Uncle Tom.
Yeah, CNN should not be saying things like that. I mean, that's basically an insult, not an actual term.
Yeah, and it's silly. I mean, it's yet another reason. I don't need more reasons not to watch CNN. I mean, but...
if all TVs were destroyed, that would be...
If I had a choice, I'm on a desert island and there's CNN over here, and there's one of those old-fashioned instruction manuals for how to operate your television written in Korean English.
Where's the off button?
Yeah, the Korean English. I'd read that before I'd watch CNN.
Yeah.
So if we go back in, and we have this story out here, people who are so anxious to sink Sanders that they're trying to suggest that maybe the right thing to do here is to run Michelle Obama and even Nancy Pelosi for president.
Ooh.
I mean, you got to be living in loony land, on the street in San Francisco to think that Nancy Pelosi would be a sensible presidential candidate. But I do think there is a chance in the coming weeks here that we're going to see Team Obama say, well, I don't know that Michelle would want to be vice president. I don't know that she really credibly could argue that she should be president. But you're hearing, I've heard various whisper rumors. One is that they would come up with somebody like, they mentioned this guy Sherrod Brown, or Sherrod Brown, however you pronounce his name, who's a senator from Ohio, might be mooted as the president, and Michelle would come in as vice president. But why would Michelle want to be vice president?
So you could kill that guy and then become president.
Kill that guy, yeah.
Wait, why would they do it? Let's think about that for a second, Charles. Why would they do that? Like, honestly, I think if they just said Michelle Obama is running for president, people would go nuts. It would be like announcing, something people really want. Guns N' Roses came out with a follow-up album to Use Your Illusion. Everybody went crazy and it sucked, and then that was it. Same thing with Michelle Obama. Everybody will go crazy, and then they'll realize she sucks and go back to...
But now the challenge, of course, is that we have a process. It's not that we've had a series of primaries and caucus, and now we've got Super Tuesday in a few days now, 2 days. For somebody to come out of the woodwork who hasn't campaigned yet and say, I think I'll just be president or vice president or whatever.
Well, but if it's somebody as famous as Michelle Obama, I feel like they could do that, even though it's unconventional, but she's just a terrible candidate. And somebody who's not like internationally famous like Michelle Obama or Hillary Clinton just has no chance. Who's that senator you just mentioned? Nobody knows who that is.
Yeah, but so what I'm saying, you now have a speculative. We know who the Republican candidate is going to be, and then we don't yet know who the Democratic candidate is going to be, and we don't know. You could have a scenario where somebody other than Bernie Sanders and Mike Bloomberg is the Democratic candidate, and then Sanders decides, I'm going to run anyway as an independent, and Bloomberg says, I'll do the same thing. So you could have, I don't know if it's legally possible to do this at that late stage, but wouldn't that be interesting?
What would Sanders do?
Run as an independent.
Why is that a benefit, though?
He'd say, listen, I have viewpoints that obviously don't fit within the Republican Party. They clearly didn't. I thought they'd fit in the Democrat Party. We see what that party is. I'm not going to pull it 2016. I'm going to go out. He could try it.
Yeah, but it's not going to work.
Yeah. Well, I think at this stage...
he should just be like, as long as Hillary's not the vice president, I'm okay. Because that's like signing your own death warrant.
So a small shout out to this next one. I was asked to have to be interviewed for a film that didn't seem to be coming to fruition, but in recent days and weeks, it now appears that it's coming out. It's called Sensational. I have just a small role in it, but Roger Stone's in it, and Alex Jones is in it, and it's I forget exactly how it's coming out, but if you go on IMDb, you can get to it. There's the trailer.
There's the trailer. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually the first voice in the trailer.
Yep.
But and it was fun. It was interesting for me to do this. This is the second one that I've done, but it was interesting. This was one that had a lot of attention to the sound and a lot of multiple takes and all this kind of stuff. And when you and I do it, we just sit down and we do it.
I've been paying a lot of attention to the sound.
Yes, you have a tremendous amount of attention. But I'm talking about the background sound and all outside. So. I'm pleased that this is going to be out there. We'll wait and see if anybody watches it and what the reaction might be to it. But I think there are probably going to be more of these types of things done as people grow to consider the degree to which alternative media is, I think, replacing lamestream media as a place where people get their news and analysis.
Exactly.
And now here, can you imagine this? I refer to Chelsea now as Raggedy Ann, but if you don't remember as a child having the Raggedy Ann and Raggedy Andy dolls, but I can't imagine saying something this stupid. I wish my grandparents had Planned Parenthood. Why exactly?
So that they could have aborted.
So that I wouldn't be alive.
Exactly.
It's maybe there's.
I share her wish. They could have aborted Hillary. We would have saved all this problem.
Yeah, it's just. I just don't understand it. And I say that from the perspective of having had the privilege of seeing the amniocentesis films of both of my children. When they're specks, and you see that for the first time, you're like, wow, there's something there. It's not, this is
this
not...
whole pregnancy really works.
No, but what my point is, this is when the early, you're talking 10, 12 weeks in, there's not much there, but you look at it, and there's clearly a spirit in there. This is not...
A little body moving around.
Yeah, it's not even really yet a whole body. It's
well, they have them in 3D now, Charles.
Yeah, I was back.
Really...
Why do you have the pencil guys doing like this really?
Yeah, they're like, can you see it? And you're like...
Yeah, pretty much.
It's like
that's
a
kind
dot. Now it's like a video game. The thing is grabbing the camera.
Right. There's like commercials on the kid, and
Right.
yeah.
This child is sponsored by.
But I mean, to have a reverence for life would seem to me something that we all should agree. It's kind of cool to be alive, but to just gleefully say, I really wish my grandmother had been able to abort my mother so I wouldn't have been born. It's kind of a
Demonic.
It's weird. As the mother of 3 children, I don't get it.
This is called psychopathy. Welcome to the lesson for today.
Yeah.
Anyway, on that note.
Yeah. And so then here's a story. You read this and you say, oh, this is atrocious. 10 richest people in the world have more money than the total output of 85% of 85 of the poorest countries.
Whoa.
Yeah, but we've been through this before on the subject of the number of doctors per 100,000 people in the US and Europe compared to Africa. I mean, the resources, the infrastructure, the investment that has been spent in a country like the United States compared to these 85 poorest countries, there's the gap. You can't overnight say, well, because we've been investing trillions, maybe $4 or $5 trillion a year in the United States for the last, call it 30 to 50 years, you're not going to change that, even with a mammoth works program, to the point where you would create the conditions where people could earn the type of income and save the type of money to compete with the 10 richest people. It's just not going to happen.
They could have a works program to genetically revive the mammoth. Have a mammoth works program.
There you go.
What could go wrong?
That's right. Mammoth steaks.
Somebody tried to do that. They got some DNA from a mammoth and impregnated an elephant with it. I don't know what happened. They did.
Did it? Well, we don't know what happened. It's not in this book.
Look that up. I'm not sure what happened to the mammoth elephant. That's a good question.
And just one final thought before we get into the meat of the presentation. There is breaking news that Turkey, which is in this war in Syria, where Russia is certainly involved, Iran may be involved, that Turkey may invoke its NATO treaty rights.
And do what?
And ask NATO
to do what?
To enter the war in Syria with Turkey.
Why did we ever put...
I know.
See, because the other problem is not just the war in Syria. Turkey is also trying to exert tremendous influence over Libya and basically just supporting mercenaries who are trying to destroy Libya so they can steal all their oil and gold and minerals and all that stuff. Turkey is bad news.
Well, if you may remember, Barack Obama had cited Erdogan as being a prime partner for the United States in the beginning. Yeah, I agree. I think, especially coming off a discussion we had about Afghanistan in the beginning of this section here, I hope we don't, the deep staters don't try to careen us now into another conflict.
They're going to, for sure. Yeah. I do want to thank Paul Allwood for utilizing Super Chat, Charles.
Great.
Excellent. Yeah.
So why don't we jump into the next page? Now, I'm positioning this now for the discussion that we'll hear about in a second with Michael Smith. We're going to be going over in that discussion some details that I wanted to make sure the crowd was fresh in their minds before they saw the presentation. Michael Smith, if you hit this link here, did an exhaustive piece, which he would have been aware of when we were doing the interview, which chronicles the evolution of the fraudulent solicitation of funds by Bill Clinton and others to the Australian government, and then the subsequent illegal transfer of 25 million Australian to Clinton projects that were never authorized as being a charity. And he does this in this piece. If you just scroll quickly down it, you'll see there's a timeline. He just goes chapter and verse. Yeah, here we go. This exhaustive timeline through it. So if people are interested to learn more of the facts that are so fresh in Michael's mind as he makes his analysis in the interview you're going to hear in a second, this is the background for you. We've been over this once before, but this background has been provided to Christopher Wray.
And he ignored it.
And well, we don't know what he's done yet, but he has had it now this will be almost 2 years he's had it.
Yeah, and he's done nothing.
Yeah.
So that counts kind of as ignoring it in my book.
Yeah. So if we go back into the slide for a sec, Alexander Downer, who was then the equivalent of Secretary of State of Australia, signed a memorandum of understanding on the 22nd of February 2006 with Bill Clinton. And that memorandum of understanding, Bill Clinton was not an officer or director of any part of the Clinton Foundation. And a memorandum of understanding is not a legal document. And so therefore it's not binding. But query, did the Clinton Foundation pay to fly Bill Clinton to Sydney where he signed this? And if so, who decided that the expenses were proper? That they should have been reimbursed by a foundation that was only supposed to do work in Little Rock. And there are two versions of the 2005 Clinton Foundation annual report. And one is on the Clinton Foundation website. The real one can be found in ProPublica. Now, if you go to ProPublica, Jason, this is a new thing, one on the right, yeah. I just want to show people, this is a slight digression, and this should be, send up a frisson, or whatever the right phrase is, of extreme fear. I have, for the first time, I generally search on the person's name or the EIN. For the fun of it, Jason, what happens if you put in Clinton Climate Initiative here? And you hit go.
Whoa, that looks like a lot.
And you see here this these are, mentions of it in there, but if you go down, Global Environmental Options, Great Plains Institute, Green Schools Alliance, okay, a number of different people here gave money to this Clinton Climate Initiative, an entity that has never lawfully been formed in any jurisdiction as a portion of the Clinton Foundation. So this is a new search. So if you go back in again,
to the search?
Yeah, and put Clinton Global Initiative. Now you got all these people appear to have given money to the Clinton Global Initiative, again, a charity that was never lawfully organized.
What's 4 Girls Foundation?
Yeah, I don't even want to think. Or what about the 111 Foundation?
So these weird. That's weird. They both use 4.
Yeah, but so we will be able, and members of our crowd will be able to go and look at this one, the DBA Arogya World Foundation. I mean, so we will be able to go in here and chronicle many, many people who have claimed donations to something that was never validly organized as a charity. And do it, you see how quickly you're able to do it, get all these leads. So people who have an interest in recouping money, taxpayer money.
Also known as anyone but the FBI.
Right, and the IRS. Now have this tool. Here's Daffy's Foundation.
Is that the clothing store that's out of business?
I don't know.
Isn't it out of business? They used to have it on Fifth Avenue.
Do they really? But you see, they're quite an eBay Foundation. I mean, there are lots and lots of people have given money to something that never lawfully existed as a charity, including the Ford Foundation. So going back then into the slide for a sec, Jason.
Yeah.
So in 2005, 2 different versions of the annual report. The actual legal name of the Clinton Foundation was the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation. The name used in each of these filings was a name that had not yet been legally amended, William J. Clinton Foundation. So that's wrong. The articles of incorporation for the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation were not, as far as I can tell, ever adopted by the trustees, which is a big problem. It's not, you don't just incorporate the document, you have to amend it and make clear that the trustees or directors have adopted the articles. That wasn't done. It says in the Statement 17 is an answer to a question in this audit report, which says, did you change any of your organizational documents? And they claim in Statement 17 that they didn't amend their articles, but they did amend their bylaws. Okay. The fact is, The records in Arkansas show that they did attempt to amend their Articles of Incorporation on the 25th of April, 2005. We've done prior presentations where we explain that the amendment was defective, that they didn't do it properly. The new name was supposed to be the William J. Clinton Foundation, not William J. Clinton Foundation. They never supplied a conformed copy of the amended Articles of Incorporation. So by doing what they did, they blew up the organizational documents for the foundation on April 25th, as of April 25th, 2005. And we're going to show you an on-point comparable where the Department of Treasury, the IRS, retroactively revoked the authority of a public charity to operate for just this type of defect, even a lesser defect, in 2008, just as Barack Obama was beating John McCain, just as Hillary Clinton was inveigling to become Secretary of State. At the same time that they were trying to cover up this fraud, George Bush's Treasury Department put a charity out of business for a far smaller set of infractions. Okay? So when we think about the tale that we're going to be telling, and you think about what Michael Smith's going to discuss with us, you need to have in the back of your mind the concept of negligence. Trustees run charities. Directors run charities. Not the executives, not the donors, it's the trustees. And the question is whether the trustees performed their duties or whether they were negligent. And ordinary negligence, negligence meaning you just were, careless.
This is extraordinary.
This is called gross negligence.
Disgusting.
And yeah, gross negligence is I think this is a definition of gross negligence is the record of the Clinton Foundation. Right. So if we go to the next next page.
Well, that bat soup is getting to you, Charles.
That's right. Sorry.
Instant kind, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I'm just walking down the street. You just more bad soup. Anyway. This is lifted from the BKD's first attempt to audit the Clinton Foundation, 9th of June, 2006. It says here, and this is BKD saying it, in previous years, the foundation prepared its financial statements using the modified cash basis of accounting. They don't go on to say, which you can't use in the US. They admit that they used it, June 9th, 2006. So none of the financial statements that are out there, none of the reports that are out there for the Clinton Foundation through the 8th of June 2006 were prepared in accordance with US requirements. None of them.
Nice.
Okay? Here the modified cash basis of accounting is explained in this is lifted from the 2004, in quotes, audit done by BKD. And it basically says, you can read it at your leisure, that it's worthless. Modified cash basis of accounting tells you nothing. And remember that in the period, this initial period when they're putting the thing together, when they're using modified cash basis of accounting, that's when they've hired a contracting firm to go and build this complex out in Little Rock. You would think the contracting firm will want to make sure that the Clinton Foundation had the money to pay for the project, but they decided they're not going to keep track of their pledges, they're not going to keep track of their bills, they're not going to keep track of their accounts receivable, none of that. They're just going to fly by wire, fly by seat of pants. Then we get to the question of...
Sorry, Charles, did you realize that the building itself has the phone number for the Clinton Foundation printed right on it? So I guess people can conceivably walk up and call and send them money.
Does it really?
It looks like it. It's 501-374-4242 or something right below this IMAX dinosaur poster.
It's amazing. Well, so remember as well that in this time frame, Hillary Clinton's representing the state of New York as a U.S. senator, right? Now, the state of New York, they'd moved to New York, and she'd moved in 99, I think, maybe 2000, or 99. The state of New York has very strict filing requirements. If you hit this, Jason, sorry.
It's okay. It's more coronavirus for everybody.
No, I hope not.
No, I'm joking.
So this is an example of some of these tough filing requirements. They go on and on and on. But I lifted, if you go back into the slide, I lifted some of the specific ones, and it's just basically what it says here is you've got to provide an audit. If you register in New York, which they started in 1998, June of 98, you've got to provide a real audit in New York, which they've never done. Sorry. So if we go to the next page, yeah. So Michael Smith talked about this back in 2016, that the CEO of the Clinton Foundation definitely knew, it definitely knew that Ira Magaziner and the other people running Chai.
Was that Eric Braverman?
Niels. No, not back then. It was Bruce Lindsay. Knew that they had basically diverted $23 million, and they covered that over they had a money set aside for an endowment. They basically stole from their endowment to make the books, to cook the books. Smith wrote about this. We've talked about it. We know that Kamiki Gibson, a lawyer hired by the CEO of the Clinton Foundation, studied this. And the report was basically diabolical. It was saying, holy crap, we're basically out of compliance legally, got all kinds of problems. And nonetheless, they then negotiated with Valerie Jarrett a memorandum of understanding, which is linked here, where the two parties got together and agreed to characterize the William J. Clinton Foundation as being fine. They then allowed Hillary to testify to the Senate, lying about, not telling the truth about the true state of the Clinton Foundation. They lied to the New York and California authorities. They said, look, we can't show you our audit because it's not done yet, when it was done yet.
That seems to be the standard thing to say, right? Oh, it's not done yet. Because even Trump said that.
Yeah, it's not done. But in this case, it was done, and it was wrong, and it would have, any serious person looking at it would have said, this thing is a mess. So the question is, how many different people, when history goes back over this record, how many different people knew about these mistakes, and instead of trying to correct them, decide we better cover this up because we'll have something on the Clintons, we'll have leverage on the Obamas. This then makes more sense why we would have had the Secret Server system. And here, Jason, I wonder if you look here, we hit the lookup. And this, if you punch in www.clintonemail.com, okay, this shows this thing was issued on the 13th of January 2009 at 8:37 in the evening. So after she finished, the day she finishes her testimony before the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, they set up this, they get this domain name over which is run the Secret Server, Clinton email. There's no coincidence there. Yeah. Now, I thought I was interested I punched in PresidentClinton.com.
Probably a porno site. Because he's got another email address there, yeah?
This is June 5th, 2002. And that's interesting because that's just right around the time that they ramped up the CHI, the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative. This is right before Barcelona. The Barcelona conference was in July of 2002. So I don't know how closely people have followed the origins of PresidentClinton.com. I guess that our FBI has not investigated the history of this domain server or tried to go and chase down email traffic and other traffic related to PresidentClinton.com. And I wonder there's another one, try DougBand.com.
Is that a thing?
And I'm sure there are, others that we could try.
Yeah, there it is.
And this was May 23rd, 2010, which is just when the Clinton Global Initiative was ramping up and his Teneo was just coming together. So again, there are many that you could pursue. If you had an FBI that was actually interested in getting to the bottom of what they were doing with these charities, think of the information that you could put together and weave together.
You could really get some stuff done.
Yeah, you could maybe prosecute people for fraud. Wow. So if we go the final 2 pages here, this is the next page. All right, in the timeline here, we're going to tell you about, this is where I found it. There's this nonprofit law blog, if you can hit that, Jason. Okay, this is a story published January 5th, 2009. So think about this, before Barack Obama was sworn in as president.
These guys are in the Matrix, Charles.
Neo?
Yeah.
And if you go back into the slide for a sec, the second link is the actual revocation letter. And I'm thinking of several people who want to read this letter very carefully. But this is an example of a letter you do not want to get. This would seem to be for an entity that's maybe based in New York. But if you see the date of it, the release date was the 19th of December 2008, but the letter was issued September 16th, 2008. Okay? And this is the kind of letter, you could read it at your leisure, that takes you through how the IRS examines charities that might be the subject of getting their tax exemption revoked. You go through a process, you get an analysis, you get a chance to contest, and then the hammer drops, and you're screwed. So the process began May 13th. If we go into the slide, the timeline here, John Glasgow, you remember, the accountant who was trying to make sense of the Clinton Foundation financial statements, which he couldn't do because they're impossible to understand because they're not in compliance with GAAP. He disappears on January 28th, 2008, just as Hillary flames out in the early process against Obama. The IRS, it turns out from the letter that you just saw, had begun auditing this suspect charity. They determined that the target in question, we don't know the name of it, had failed, May 13th. On the 5th of June, Obama meets with Hillary in D.C., and they smoke the peace pipe and agree to work together. In July, Ira Magaziner confessed to charity fraud, and they decide, we'll just cover it up. We're too deeply into this. We can't expose this is my working theory. Also in July, the New Yorker publishes that cover showing Michelle and Barack as terrorists in the Oval Office. There's rumors that maybe Hillary's going to challenge Barack Obama in a floor fight at the Democratic National Convention. And then on the 13th of August, the chairman of the Arkansas Democratic Party is executed in the Democratic Party offices in Little Rock.
Has that murder ever been solved?
Well, they pinned it on, chased a guy down and shot him dead. So
that's how they like to do that. There'd be no trial or questions.
That's right. And then the so-called 60-day rule, where you wouldn't release any politically sensitive investigations, the trigger date for that would have been 6th of September 2008. And this final notice that we just showed you is issued on the 16th of September 2008. So if you're sitting here in 2020 with Donald Trump's resources and an interest in getting to the bottom of this, you'd say, now, wait a minute. We know that Bob Mueller and Jim Comey and Rod Rosenstein had investigated the Clinton Foundation for 4 years, from 2001 to 2005, and didn't see an obvious fraud. We know that the paperwork for this thing was a disaster on many, many levels. No articles, no bylaws, no audits, no full disclosure, no controls, massive conflicts of interest, massive personal benefits. And now we have this spot-on comparable case where just in this time frame, the Department of Treasury has retroactively revoked the authority of a charity to operate because it had changed its business without amending its articles of incorporation, and because the family that was around this charity that had its stuff revoked was milking it as its personal piggy bank. Does that sound at all familiar to you?
It does.
So on the one hand, for a much smaller and much less visible and politically significant charity, that gets stamped into oblivion in 2008. But for the Clintons, it's, oh, okay, we'll make you Secretary of State, get rid of the Inspector General at State, let's amp up the charities, more fake charities, more grants, because you're the Clintons. You know, you should be able to go back and say, okay, on the one hand, why do we give the Clintons a pass, and why do we land on this charity? So if you go to the next page, this is lifted from that letter. In key language is, you're retroactively revoked because you are not operated exclusively for an exempt purpose. In other words, you've gone past your charter to do stuff that is not tax exempt. And then this key language in here, it focuses on the fact that they did not amend their Articles of Incorporation, which we've shown you. They have never amended the Articles of Incorporation of the Clinton Foundation to be anything other than a presidential archive and research center in Little Rock. They've never done it. They've never, this thing is actually, that was revoked, can credibly have said it was an organization because it had Articles of Incorporation and bylaws. I would argue the Clinton Foundation trustees never validly adopted articles or bylaws.
There's something else strange that I've just noticed, Charles. People might, hopefully they share my opinion, but showing these things again and again is very useful. You know how on Jeffrey Epstein's island, he's got all those sundials?
You got sundials here too?
Well, I don't know. There's all these round things, and I mean, they've got these light posts around them. I was just noticing how the shadows are cast by the light posts, and I wonder if this is not, I don't know what the function of the sundials are on Jeffrey Epstein's weirdo island, but we've got, more weirdo stuff here at the Clinton Foundation.
Doesn't surprise me. So in addition here, this ruling castigates the directors for milking the foundation. And it says, it closes in saying, the organization, the Clinton Foundation, has to establish that it is not organized or operated for the benefit of private interests, such as the creator, his family, shareholders of the organization, or persons controlled directly or indirectly by such private persons. Now, importantly, when we think about a private benefit, various rulings have defined them to be not simply profit, but any kind of advantage.
Like flying around.
Yeah, well, any advantage, like favorable image, a book deal, an office in a fancy part of Manhattan that you don't have to pay for, with a chief of staff that you don't have to pay for, with a travel budget you don't have to pay for, with,
right.
A fruit, a privilege, a gain, or an interest. So looking at the Clinton Foundation, going back, doing the simpleton's approach to the Clinton Foundation. Clinton family, child in college, clueless, parents bankrupt, nearly impeached, out of money.
Clinton Foundation for Dummies could be book two.
Right. That's where we were in 2000. Clinton family, 20 years later, the daughter wishes that her own mother had been aborted, but she's happy to have 3 children. She's worth tens of millions of dollars. Family's worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Book steals out the, this kind of book.
Steals.
Book steals, exactly. Speech deals, book steals, all kinds of money in pocket. And this would seem to me, if you're going to knock down whatever this charity is for relatively trivial expenses, it would seem to me that you've got to do something about the Clinton Foundation.
Apparently not.
I guess not. So we're going to have to wait and see, Jason. But I think we've laid up some of the background for the interview that we can air now with Michael Smith, and let people make up their own minds.
Right. And so just to reiterate for people, Charles, this was pre-recorded the other day, and because, Michael is, another section of the earth that would make it difficult for us to have him on here live. But through the magic of various technologies, we can now have Michael with us today. So we'll just run the interview for everybody, right?
Sounds good.
Okay, very good. So let's just get that going there. Okay. We have a special
and that is a problem.
Oops, we got a little problem happening there. So let's just, sorry. make sure everything is set to go.
Yes.
Down. Okay. Sorry, Charles. Okay. Now we're ready.
Many important third-party shareholders. But
thought
I would
we were
argue that
ready,
Fox
but
is on a path to disaster here, if this
Where
is
that
really
sound
what
coming
happened.
from?
At a time, when we're not questioning enough how powerful Facebook and Google.
Okay. Sorry, Charles. Here we go.
There you go.
Charles, we have a special international guest joining us now.
Amazing.
He's been with us before, and he's been reporting on the Clinton Foundation from down under. Michael Smith, how are you, sir?
G'day, gentlemen. I'm well, thank you. Good to be with you. It's the middle of the night here. I'm in Thailand. I don't know if you can see, literally in a little bamboo and palm frond hut with Thai broadband, which is absolutely amazing. The broadband speeds here are well over 200 megabits per second up and down, and we're right on the river.
Nice.
We're actually on the ocean. There's a little lagoon next to the ocean here. It is nice. It's a lovely place. And had I known that this was going to be televisual, I might have had a shave too. My apologies. I thought it was just a voice chat.
You look fine.
Looks fine.
Good to see you again.
To see you both too.
And Michael, we've been looking at this story on your website here, michaelsmithnews.com. And can you give us a little background on this?
Sure. What I wanted to talk about tonight, given that at some point, I'm fairly confident, I know that at some point Australian authorities will want to hear from Charles and from me about this Australian taxpayer money that has gone into the Clinton Foundation improperly. So I wanted to talk about one specific and absolutely crystal clear instance of that. And it involves our former Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, and it involves the then Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, in her last hurrah as Secretary of State in September 2012. This was her last big chance with the Clinton Global Initiative and her own rounds of the UN in September. As you guys in New York know, in September, all the players from all around the world come to the UN and used to come to the Clinton Global Initiative. Our Prime Minister was very much on the make then, personally, and this is a story of how she managed to arrange a significant donation to the Clinton Foundation of $14 million of Australian taxpayer money that, as I think we'll demonstrate now, was grossly improper, highly dubious, and timed to coincide with Hillary Clinton duchessing her around New York and introducing her as a champion of global education and ultimately lining her up for the job that she took after politics, which was as the chair of the Global Partnership for Education. Her name is Julia Gillard, and the story starts in 2008. In 2008, we had a newly elected leftist government in Australia after a very long period of conservative regime. The Conservative government in Australia had left a substantial fiscal surplus. They were running surpluses every year, and they had a lot of money in the bank. Now, that was decimated within a couple of short years by this leftist government, Labor, the Australian Labor Party. And one of the key programs that it used in its electoral platform was to promote the idea of global warming and climate change as being a key differentiator between it and the Conservatives who'd been in power for all those years of surplus. So in 2008, the Minister for Climate Change, a woman called Penny Wong, made out of the blue this very peculiar announcement. She announced that the Clinton Foundation, and it's fairly new at that time, climate initiative, had agreed to use a carbon accounting system developed by the Australian government. This is voodoo economics. Like, Charles, you're going to reel in horror when you hear what this is all about. A carbon accounting system, it sounds very grand, but in essence what it was a series of satellite photos of large areas of the Earth, time series of photos that looked for the shades of green and how much extra greening there was over any particular time period, over a particular area of ground, and looked for signs of deforestation or, enhanced forest growth then applied some weirdo voodoo algorithm to it, and punched out a number that is an alleged or purported carbon accounting result. You know, you're either in deficit with your carbon accounting, you're in surplus, you've got credits, you're sucking up carbon. It's total voodoo, total witch doctor sort of stuff. I don't want to sound, like I'm impugning any particular group by using that word, but it was voodoo stuff. And the Clinton Foundation, of course, jumped all over it. They said, oh, we're going to use this. It had been developed at costs of millions of dollars by the Australian government. And our climate change minister puts out this announcement in 2008 that the Clinton Foundation is going to use it globally. Not for any money, mind you. They didn't pay any money for it. I think, when I say we, the Australian government were just in awe of doing stuff with the Clintons, in awe of their prestige and esteem, and gave it to them for free. So you're with me so far on the significance of them? Okay. You go ahead. You go ahead.
I just want to point to the date here, 18 February 2008, on this.
Yep.
And ask the viewers to remember that date and the fact that the Clinton Climate Initiative did not exist at any time, and especially not on 18 February 2008.
Okay. Right. Well, that makes what they did next even more significant, because they took our carbon accounting system and, by the by, Australian government technicians and support people to keep it punching out its voodoo, analysis of carbon accounting. They took that to Kenya, and they did it with funding from the Rockefellers, the Rockefeller Foundation. Rockefeller funded the Clintons to go to Kenya and to put in place, develop a carbon accounting system for the government of Kenya using satellite imaging and various inputs from, I know, I feel embarrassed talking about it. Seriously, like, it's so bizarre. And why, by the by, why would the Australian taxpayer be in the slightest bit interested in funding a carbon accounting system for the government of Kenya? It's 12,000 kilometres away. There's like 20 hours to fly there. Kenya, next to Somalia, Ethiopia, Tanzania, Democratic Republic of Congo, just nestled there in Africa. And suddenly the Australian taxpayer out of the blue says, righto, well, we better fund the Clinton Foundation to put in place a carbon accounting system for the government of Kenya. Anyway, the Rockefellers were paying for it. All good. Rockefellers, they can do whatever they want, nothing to do with the Australian government or Australian taxpayers. Fast forward now to September 2012. And keep in mind, by this stage, 4 years later, the Rockefellers have well and truly paid for what purported to be a carbon accounting system for the government of Kenya, and they paid the Clinton Foundation to produce that. And the Clinton Foundation has made all submissions to the Rockefeller, said, yeah, going swimmingly, going brilliantly, thank you for all that money. The carbon accounting system, which, by the way, the Australian taxpayers have paid for, has been installed and it's being fixed up by Australian technicians. Thank you very much. In September 2012, Gillard, our Prime Minister, who's on the make, a social climber, wanting to become plugged in with the pay-to-play Clinton introduction scheme, she's announced that she's going to New York for the Clinton Global Initiative and the UN meetings that take place at that time. Out of the blue, one of her ministers makes an announcement that in 2012, the Australian government has decided that it's going to give a contract to the Clinton Foundation for exactly what the Rockefellers had already been paying for, a carbon accounting system in Kenya. Can you believe that? The serendipity. That announcement is made just the week, with actually days prior to Gillard, our Prime Minister, going over there to be shepherded around by the then Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton. Now, you have to keep in mind that Clinton's last hurrah was the September round in 2012. She was gone in 2013. John Kerry took over as Secretary of State. So this was her last big pay-to-play. It was the zenith of the Clinton Foundation pay-to-play donations scandal. And our Prime Minister at the time, Gillard, was right there in the heart of it. The $500,000 announcement that you just had up there was the initial announcement of what turned out to be $14 million that the Australian taxpayer paid to the Clinton Foundation for this dodgy carbon accounting system in Kenya, voodoo economics that didn't actually do anything. And the $14 million itself was hidden away by Julia Gillard in an obscure green fund, a green entity. I don't know if you've got the graphic of it there, but it was some clean green, innovation fund or something like that it was called. So it was off the government's balance sheet. Yeah, it is there. If you just keep going down a little bit further, that green, that's the one. That's it. Hidden away, exactly, Fast Start Climate Finance. Off the government's balance sheet. So it took me like ages and ages and ages of searching to actually find it. But there it is in black and white.
Sorry,
carbon accounting.
Is it the total 12.9, Michael, or is it just 500,000?
No. It was 14 million in the end. That's at that point when that was printed, but it ended up being $14 million for that particular initiative, which the Clintons had no demonstrated expertise in. All the works of the it was dodgy in any case, but the works of the carbon accounting system had all been developed at Australian taxpayer cost, and I'll reiterate, the Clintons had already been paid by the Rockefellers for this identical work. So that $14 million that happened to coincide with Gillard in the ultimate pay-to-play, Hillary Clinton's last hurrah as the Secretary of State, coincided with Gillard getting lined up for all of these post-political roles to do with education, and the biggie of them all was as the chair of the Global Partnership for Education. Now that little episode to me is a microcosm of a range of other interactions that Australian taxpayers have had with the Clinton Foundation for activities that were already being funded by other governments or other entities, and for dubious purposes that all have the same character about them: ill-defined goals and objectives up front, malleable, just so loosely put together so-called KPIs, and activities that ultimately make no difference. Like,
Michael, what's a KPI?
Is agriculture any better in Kenya as a result?
Is a KPI like an MOU?
No, key performance indicator. A term, I don't know if it's used in American business parlance, but it's a measure. Like, are we producing X number of widgets more this quarter than we were last quarter? Right. In the case of the Clinton Foundation's agreements with the Australian government, inevitably KPIs are woolly. Enhance the agricultural sector in Kenya, stuff like that,
Well, if I could just jump in for a second, Michael, to give you some context on this. Of course, you remember remember that September 2012 was Benghazi.
Absolutely, I do.
Yeah. And so this is when we go and overlay the timeline of what she was doing, what Hillary was doing in this, at the same time that she's, grifting for the Clinton Foundation, she's lying about Benghazi. And by the way, in 2008, there was no such legal entity as William J. Clinton Foundation. It did not have bylaws. It had not been organized properly. I mean, just go on and on and on. No diligence of any kind could have been done by your government in sending this money. So it'd be key to get the dates of when the money was wired from your government to what Clinton Foundation entities. I don't know if we can get that or not.
Could you just repeat that? It would be impossible for our government to have done any due diligence on this entity because the entity didn't exist.
Yeah, absolutely impossible.
That's correct?
Yeah, because as a technical legal matter in the U.S., you have to have, for an Arkansas nonprofit corporation, it must have articles of incorporation that were adopted by its trustees or directors, and those trustees or directors need also to have adopted bylaws. Bylaws are like the rules of the road of a corporation. Articles set forth its basic construction. And so on April 25th, 2005, the original entity, William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation, may have changed its bylaws, but they may have changed its articles of incorporation, but they did it in a way which gutted the legal status of the entity. It was incredibly sloppy. And at every moment since then, this entity has not lawfully existed. The main Clinton Foundation. It hasn't properly amended its articles, its bylaws, registered anywhere in the world properly. So at every moment from April 25th, 2005 forward, you're dealing here with what I would call just an informal association of people pretending to operate in the guise of a foundation.
Charles, I just sent you on this Skype platform a link to something I published a while ago, and it refers to the 21 pages that were missing from the Clinton Foundation's IRS filing for that year, for the relevant year you're talking about,
Right.
2005. And those pages, which, as you know, I ferreted out, in fact, it's a damning indictment of what the Clintons were up to, because amongst the other things that those pages disclose, firstly, is that the actual filing is probably a forgery,
Right.
given the dates that on printing footers and other dates within the material there. But it contains what purports to be a deed that gave the board of directors authority to retrospectively approve any action, and it's obviously designed to cover for Bill Clinton, what Clinton has been up to around the world, making promises, commitments, entering into MOUs, doing all sorts of things as purporting to be a representative of this so-called Clinton Foundation, acts that he could have had no legal authority to perform. I think that's a very important document, that those 21 pages.
It is indeed, Michael, because included in the 21 pages, it says at the top of the bylaws, it says amended and restated bylaws of the William J. Clinton Presidential Foundation on April 25th, 2005. Well, on April 25th, 2005, they changed the name to the William J. Clinton Foundation without presidential in it.
Yeah.
So the bylaws on the face of it don't apply to this entity. Beyond which, I don't know Australian law, and I'm not a lawyer, but I do know something about American law. You can write a private contract between two people, but you have to respect statute. We can't enter into a contract to engage in white slavery, right? I mean, even though we could write a nice document, you have to check and make sure that the laws that apply to what you're doing are not being contravened by the agreement. And one little thing that people haven't wrapped their arms around yet with the Clinton Foundation, it's a special type of foundation under U.S. law. It has to be run by a truly independent board, independent from its creators. It can't be the plaything of Bill Clinton or the Clinton family. It's strictly barred from doing that.
And that's precisely what the what the deed in that IRS filing, which the Clintons tried to hide. They purport to be open and transparent about their IRS filings, but they hid this from the version that they exhibited on their website. That deed, or that contract, purports to grant authority to, obviously it's Clinton, it says anybody, but it's Clinton that they're talking about, to engage in any act on behalf of that entity, and for the board to have the authority to retrospectively approve any act or anything or any commitment or any offer, including getting the entity itself into debt that Clinton has made in his travels, around the world. It's just the most extraordinary. It's hard to believe it when you see it in writing, but there it is.
It's especially hard to believe when you think that the Clintons, at least Bill and Hillary, both went to Yale. I like to call it lie school, not law school, but both had high positions. I mean, Bill was Attorney General, Governor, President. Hillary was Senator, Secretary of State. They had to have been involved in legal matters, and they have to understand that when you set up an Arkansas nonprofit and you try to do anything outside of Arkansas, you better check New York law. New York law requires that when you come into our high-tax state, as a foreign corporation, which this is, you have to register in New York truthfully, not only with the Attorney General of New York, but with the Secretary of State of New York. And they never registered these entities until years after they had been solicited illegally, including from your government. So when Downer signed that MOU in 2006, he signed it with a completely non-existent entity.
And with a representative of that entity, Clinton, who had no lawful authority at that time to engage in any act on behalf of that entity. And in fact, I think you and I have discussed this before. Whilst there's no judicial finding about this, the truth is, Clinton at the time he'd been a disbarred lawyer as a result of untruthful testimony, perjury, that he'd given. And he's therefore of a class or of a character of person who is disqualified from acting in a position of authority as a manager or trustee of a US charity. That's my understanding of the law in the US and of the facts. Do you agree, Charles? That's the case?
I do agree with that. And I think, one thing that's extremely telling here, Michael, I don't know Australian law on this matter, but I got to believe there is a law in Australia that prohibits government officials from just giving money to individuals willy-nilly around the world, right?
Yeah. Yeah, yes, there is.
I mean, is it a federal law or is it a provincial law or whatever you call it, or is it?
Look, there's all sorts of guidelines. There's all sorts of ministerial conduct guidelines and tendering guidelines as well. We are, with taxpayer money, governments are obliged to get the best deal for the taxpayer in Australia. And they're obliged to put contracts of certain values out to tender. This Clinton Foundation $25 million MOU with Alexander Downer that resulted in contracts being let to the Clintons for Papua New Guinea, for Vietnam, for Indonesia. The tenders were advertised after the contracts had been written with the Clintons. When you go through the paper trail, the audit trail, the criminality, and it is a chosen word, I select it carefully, the criminality is glaringly obvious. But it strikes me that the esteem or the aura that surrounds the Clintons is such that people just turn a blind eye to it. Like when I went to DFAT, our Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, when I wrote to them and said this man Clinton was disbarred as a lawyer, he couldn't have acted in any position of authority with a charity, and he was not the thing that he held himself out to be, a representative. He wasn't associated with the the library, presidential library, which, call it what it is. The Clinton Foundation at the time was a presidential library. He was neither a trustee nor a manager of that. He has deceived us by signing on that MOU with Alexander Downer. He's deceived us. He's told us that he is a representative of this foundation when he's not. And what are you going to do about it, DFAT? They wrote back to me, our Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, wrote back to me and said, oh, yes, but he is.
He isn't.
True story. He's not. He wasn't. He's a grifter. He's like that bloke on The Simpsons that comes into town to sell the monorail, the hat on. I've been to all these places. I put Botswana on the map. I put Papua New Guinea on the map, and I can do the same for you in Australia. And I said, really? Can we get a framed photo of me, the minister, shaking hands with you, Bill? And would you like to do an endorsement of my book when it comes out? It's that sort of rubbish was the driving factor, I believe, that led to all of these agreements, with people just in awestruck because they're the Clintons.
So, Michael, I'm going to do something with you you're going to enjoy, but I'm going to get right into the heart of what you're talking about with Jason's help here. Jason, can we put up the 2009 Clinton Foundation 990, which you can get on Clinton Foundation Annual? And this is, I think, extremely on point. So you have to Google Clinton Foundation Annual, and you'll get. Yeah, all right, right there, and then hit 2009 down here, further, yeah, 2009. All right, and then we'll go past the audit. This is the 2009 result. Keep going. And then you get to the 990, slowly, keep going. All right, so back up a little bit. Right here, okay, you see here, government grants, Michael, 122 million,
yes.
520, 657. Now, one thing the Clinton Foundation does that the other 990s don't do is they have the Schedule B grants, right? So they list out the big donors. So if we go to Schedule B, Jason, which is probably 15 pages back.
Back?
No, the other way. You were going in the right direction. Keep slow coming now. Okay, yeah. Next page. All right. You'll see a big one. Here's less than 2%. Here's a gigantic grant, 115, 397, 489, right? That's Unitate. That's the one we know about, right?
Right.
You take
Yep.
this 115, 397, 489, and you subtract it from the 122. And if you go down the page a little bit, Jason, you'll see there's a 7, 1, 2, 3, 168 is the difference. Okay? Which means that in theory, there's only one government other than Unitate that the Clinton Foundation claims gave it money. Yet I have in my pasty white hands a long list of information from the government of Norway claiming that they gave roughly that amount of money in 2009. So where's Australia's donation?
Yeah, yeah.
And there are other governments that gave money,
Yes, of course.
right? So
New
you
Zealand
look at this.
amongst them.
I mean, this is a nice little trail here, a very simple story. It's almost like, one of those, what do you call them, the wrestling match, a cage match. We can have Australia versus Norway, who really gave the money to the Clinton Foundation and how many other governments, gave money to the Clinton Foundation. This is a public document that has been out there for a long time that shows, somebody in Australia should be saying, now, wait a minute. In 2009, we were giving a lot of money to Papua New Guinea, to Indonesia. There's only one government shown here, and it's not us. How come nobody in Australia, the Australian government, isn't saying, well, wait a minute, we're not that rich?
Oh, that's exactly right. Exactly. Well, taxpayers feel that. But ministers, I don't know, have this scales over their eyes when it comes to the Clintons. There's another dimension to this as well, Charles, and it's this. The idea that money that goes to the Clintons then goes to countries in which it's operating, I think, is an absolute furphy. Money that goes to the Clintons is retained by the Clintons, and they purport to do all the work themselves. So their accounts don't show money coming in and going out, being donated or put into projects on the ground in these various countries. The money goes in and it funds Clinton Foundation activities that the Clinton Foundation is performing. And we mentioned New Zealand a moment ago. I've been going through in just so much detail the FOI results from New Zealand, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages of documents. And it strikes me that what the Clinton Foundation did for most of its time was churn out pages of verbiage and charged millions for it. And the verbiage describes purported meetings with government officials and, purported floating of ideas and putting schemes together and advancing the cause of this, that and the other. But no tangible, you can't look and say, well, here's the concrete footings, here's the foundations laid, here's the building built, here's the, the new road put in or whatever. There's none of that hard, actual deliverable, value for money that I would expect to see with contracts of this size. And it strikes me that the Clinton Foundation is unique in that regard. You don't see other charitable entities saying, donate money to us, and by the way, we will do all the stuff ourselves, and it'll be opaquely accounted for, as you've just demonstrated with that, 150 or 160 million bucks there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, have you excuse me? Have you looked at the New York State version of the 2009 audit of BKD?
I have, but it's been so long.
Is there a chance, Jason, we could put that up?
Sure. How do I get that?
Just NYS charity search.
And for the folks at home, the Clinton Foundation was required to file in New York a charity return, as well as to the IRS. So as well as to the feds, it had to file in New York as well. And the differerences between those two are quite illuminating. Correct, Charles?
Yes, exactly. We're going to show you now. If you put in 31 into EIN 31-158-0204, and then you hit search, you're going to find a different version of the 2009 audit for the Clinton Foundation than the one they have on their site. If you hit down here, Jason, you're going to find, it'll take a little bit, and then go down the page to 2009. Here, 2009, yeah. And you go to the very last last two pages when it comes up. I think it's page 83 or 84, either one, or maybe 82 or 83. Michael, this is to your point of just manufacturing reports. You're going to love this as an Australian taxpayer. You got real value for money in the Clinton Climate Initiative in 2009. Mega value for money. I'm going to show you. These pages are missing that we're going to, I don't know if you can rotate it, Jason. This page. Yeah. Okay. This is a page that is purposefully omitted from the Clinton Foundation website version of the 2009 audit. And in it, it shows your climate getting 17 million of revenue, transferring 5.3, it seems to likely to Chai. Okay, so your Australian government gave money into climate, which doesn't exist.
Yes.
It turned and took a piece to Chai. And then let's look at it. You got salaries and benefits, direct program expenditures. These numbers might be awfully small for you on the screen, Michael. The climate,
they are.
the climate had 12.5 million of expenses total, of which 34,375 were direct program expenditures. Right? Only 34,000 out of 12.5 million were direct program expenses. 6 million were for salaries.
Wow.
3.7 million were, I think, for consultants. If you go to the left, for consulting, 3.7 million. Travel, 1.8 million. Rent, 500,000. Other, 200. They spent 6 times as much money on other as they spent on actual direct program expenditures, to your point, Michael.
It's beyond belief that a charity regulator could look at those ratios of expenditure and not get that charity in, haul them over the coals, get them on the carpet. That is phenomenal. And $34,000 in direct program expenditure against $6 million in salaries, and
then look at the other thing. You remember 2009.
In travel? God.
You remember 2000. We all remember 2009 well. That was the depth of the last financial crisis. That was when market currency exchange rates were going all over the place. Here's a charity operating all over the world, getting Australian dollars, converting to U.S. dollars, spending it in Kenya, and Kenyan shillings. And you're telling me that the Climate Initiative had 12,467,401 in revenue and exactly 12,467,401 in expenses. There is not a chance in hell that actually happened.
Yeah.
That did not happen.
Yeah.
Hillary's next book.
And of that, 1.8 million in travel related to climate. That is a lot of travel.
Yeah. And then a further point. Now, we don't have this done yet, but there is, excuse me, I'm fighting a little bit of a cold. There is there's sets of regulations in most of the former British colonies in Africa have strict charity laws. Not only do they have laws pertaining to charity, but they have laws pertaining to deceptive practices. They have laws pertaining to operating healthcare, owning property, all kinds of laws. And in
British justice system.
Yeah, and in Kenya, it happens that there were requirements that they set up in actual charity in Kenya to do all this. We haven't been able to get the paperwork yet, but much as your colleague was so successful in Nigeria, I'm going to bet that there is a thicket of information in Kenya, in the files that we may or may not be able readily to get, that's going to show that they did not operate a valid charity when they were soliciting money in 2008 from you for this operation. They did not yet, as a guess, have a bona fide charity in Kenya.
Well, they have a track record in that regard because they did not have a legitimate entity in Papua New Guinea, and it was a requirement of our government that they have an entity present in Papua New Guinea. That's where the funds would go into. And so by engaging Ruby Shang, the Caterpillar dealer's wife from Vietnam, who we've spoken about in the past, I'll just rehash what she did on behalf of the Clinton Foundation. She went to Papua New Guinea and applied to set up an incorporated association under the laws that apply for ping pong teams and kids footy teams, and it's the lowest level of incorporated entity in our corporate regulatory systems, and New Guinea is very similar to Australia. It's designed for, kids' sport groups and that sort of thing. And when you set one up, when you apply to have it incorporated, you've got to wait 30 days after you place an advertisement advertising your intention to incorporate it. You've got to wait 30 days. This thing was incorporated on the day that she applied. It was incorporated without its rules of and objects being properly put together, and it was clearly, corruptly, unlawfully, criminally pushed through, and given a status as an incorporated entity. Now, the criminality in that just jumps off the page. You don't need to be much of a lawyer or a copper. It's all on the paperwork.
I'm just looking at this for the first time, Michael. Do you notice here, she claims that she set chai up in Laos. There's no chai in Laos. And in Thailand. There's no chai in Thailand.
I've not looked at those claims. I can see, I'll have a look at that.
I'm going to have to contact this Asia Foundation.
Isn't that good that I just found that?
It's fantastic.
Yeah, it is. Very useful.
Very well done.
Very useful.
She's very well qualified, having been a member of the dance faculty of Juilliard School.
Dance.
And Tisch School of the Arts.
My ex-wife was a dancer, and she was very smart. But that doesn't mean this particular lady. One thing we haven't gotten into on Michael. Not only was the Papua New Guinea form for the wrong kind of a foundation, i.e., not a public charity. It was for like a club or something. Under U.S. law, no significant action of the parent Clinton Foundation is valid unless there is a board authorization for it. So it's highly likely that there was no board of directors authorization for this individual to go on her own with one signature, just hers, and incorporate this fake little thing. I bet you she did this all over the world.
Well, it does look like a course of conduct, and a let's not mince words, a criminal course of conduct in Papua New Guinea. Do you know who succeeded her, Ruby Shang, as the boss of the Clinton Foundation, being paid millions and millions and millions of taxpayer dollars to act as the agent of the Australian government in Papua New Guinea? The Clintons put in place a new graduate who came from the accounts payable department, where he was authorising invoices in an insurance company in New York. He was a new graduate, barely out of college, and they put him in as the country manager with no experience in developing countries, no experience in epidemiology or HIV/AIDS or any medical expertise at all. He's put into this complex, corrupt, way past Zimbabwe on the corruption index. That's Papua New Guinea. They put this young kid in there basically to make sure the invoices were getting paid by the Australian government. That's about it. It's, God, when you think of the waste and the poor people who deserve so much better, but ended up getting this rubbish entity, God, it makes me so wild.
Michael, is it the case, as it is here in the United States, that you can launch an action in Australia to get money back on behalf of the taxpayers, or is that a lost cause?
Look, any citizen can bring an action. It's not the same as in the United States, where if you do it on behalf of the taxpayer, you get a cut of it. Here in Australia, it's very difficult to do anything of that nature without support of the government behind you. And both of our political parties are implicated. They both have ministers who are, involved in these dodgy decisions to give money to the dodgy Clinton Foundation. That is the interminable battle that I've been fighting. But that said, there are people of goodwill in government and in Australia, and there are people with clear-eyed analytical skills who can look at what has gone on and can see the criminality and will push to, have people held to account. And I don't want to say, I'm not going to telegraph our punches, Charles, but you and I know that we are making progress in that regard, and we have some concrete actions, some KPIs upcoming.
Good. Good. Now, on that note, your man, as they say in Ireland, your man Alexander Downer is back in the news because George Papadopoulos is making noise that there may be some new evidence that Downer was basically in the plot to basically go a key part of the plot to go after Trump, to get Trumpy. Have you heard anything new on the status of Downer?
Well, I can give you the background, what I believe to be the background to that. And it's encapsulated in a frozen moment in time. And that is when our Parliament was sitting. It's the most prominent daily feature of our parliamentary sitting is a period of time called question time, when the government has questions thrown at it and ministers have to answer. During question time, on the day of Trump's election, all the cameras were trained on our Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, and Julie Bishop. And one cameraman in particular, because we have cameras, still cameras and video cameras in our parliamentary sittings. One photo in particular captured Julie Bishop, the Foreign Minister, to whom Downer, as ambassador, reported, and the Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, both lefties and Clinton lovers, holding their smartphones up and looking at all of the Trump states, looking at the Electoral College results coming in, and you can see on their faces they've gone, "What the? Trump? I cannot believe it." It's a classic photo. Julie Bishop, Malcolm Turnbull, our Prime Minister and Foreign Minister at the time, and it is to Julie Bishop that Alexander Downer reported. So I give a little bit of a grain of salt to what George says about, Alexander Downer being an international man of intrigue and a sort of, 007 type. He's not that. But I do agree and believe that Downer and the government that he represented were not at all friendly to the Trump camp. That's it. There's one from behind. Look at the looks on their faces. There's one from behind where they finally realise that it's Trump. And that, I've FOI'd a number of documents from around that time. One of them is a briefing given to our Defence Minister at the time, a lady called Maurice Payne, who was going over to meet with Hillary Clinton. And the briefing is all Hillary this, Hillary that, when Hillary is president, when Hillary comes in. It was a shock to the Australian political system, as it was to yours as well, that ultimately it was President Trump who was elected. And there was a great deal of antipathy towards him, particularly from that Foreign Minister, Julie Bishop. She was very, very close to the Hillary Clinton camp. I'm stumbling because I look at that photo, and there are other photos in that series of Trump with Turnbull, and you can see Trump thinking, "You are a dead set." Are you allowed to say wanker?
Yes, of course.
Your
You can
videos?
say what you want.
He's a dead set wanker. That was after Trump had the phone call with Turnbull about this unbelievable deal that Turnbull had negotiated with Obama. That's the photo. That's the one. Have a look at Trump's face. Just go back to that photo, mate, you had up before. Look at Trump's face. Who is this guy? Turnbull, the Prime Minister, had negotiated with Obama a very bad deal for the United States to take a load of unwanted purported refugees who hadn't passed character tests and were not going to be allowed into Australia. Turnbull had negotiated with Obama to dump them in America. And so Trump had this telephone call with Turnbull, and it was the most heated one he had in a series of conversations with various world leaders because of that deal. So there was a great deal of distance between those two.
Turnbull looks like he's negotiating with a stubborn turd in this photo.
Turnbull.
Yeah, well, I think Sean, what's his name, the original PR guy, he called him Mr. Trumbull. I know that stuff really hurt Turnbull. Yeah, Turnbull, that guy, the Prime Minister, there's a recording of him at a parliamentary ball, sort of like your White House Correspondents' Dinner, the midwinter ball, they call it in Australia. He got up on the microphone and took the mickey, took the piss out of President Trump, did a very bad impersonation of him, made fun of him, just unimaginable. And he did it, and it's on tape. I'll send it to you after we've had this
Good,
chat.
please. Please. Very
Such
good.
things as will amaze.
This is really good. Well, Michael, we're mindful of the time over there. We don't want to keep you up too late. Is there anything you want to tell us about the Australian government working with the Clinton Foundation in Indonesia?
Not at the moment. I've got something developing there. I don't want to say anything at the moment, Charles. And we did have we should, explain, we did have a preliminary discussion prior to this video chat about the importance of not telegraphing punches in advance that would allow,
Sure.
crooked parties to anticipate and cover the trail. So let's just leave it at that.
Okay. Yeah. Good. No, I was more referring to the historical work that you had done. I wasn't telegraphing.
It's pretty fertile ground for criminal investigators.
Yes. Yes, indeed. Good. Well, Jason, do you have anything else?
Not for now. I think it's interesting to hear about all these details that Michael has uncovered, and I am delighted to have him as our guest on the new system. We're on phase 2 of an exciting system, Michael, that allows us to have you on here, great video quality and the sound and all that. So thank you for helping us test that out.
I'm delighted. At this end too, I'd have to say kudos to the authorities in Thailand. I'm in Thailand. I'm on a tiny island in the middle of the Andaman Sea. It literally is a speck of an island. And as you can see, it's a bamboo. I'm sitting on a bamboo floor. It's frond, palm fronds is the roof, and the Wi-Fi here is over 200 megabits per second up and down.
That's great.
I don't know if you've noticed any jitters. I didn't notice any with you.
No, it's
It's
amazing.
great.
I mean, it's fantastic that we
Brilliantly.
can have you in such a remote spot and still do a great segment like this.
Thank you very much.
And had I known it was going to be on video, I might have had a shave. I have
you
my
look great.
supporters in Australia going to be absolutely disgusted.
I doubt
Oh,
it.
come on. No way. Well, Michael, thank you so much
No, I
for
have
joining
not.
us. We'll definitely have you back soon for an updated report. Anything else before we say goodnight to Thailand?
Sawadee Cup.
There we go. Sawadee krap. I think that's how you say it.
Oh, you're very good.
Hey,
See,
I've
only
been
the
there
upper class
once.
people here say krap. Sawadee krap. Normal people like me go Sawadee Cup.
It sounded like crap. That's the only way I can remember it.
Krap. So
All
very
right,
much
Michael.
krap.
Well, thank you very much. And
Cheers,
people
mate.
can visit michaelsmithnews.com to stay up to date with what's going on with the Clinton Foundation shenanigans in Australia.
And other matters.
Yes.
Right. See you, man.
Well, thank you, Michael. Have a great day.
Thank you, Michael.
And there we go, Charles. Great interview with the great Michael Smith.
Yes, indeed. We've had him on, I think, at several different points in time, and he does such great work, some of which he discusses, and a lot of which he cannot yet expose to the general public. So it's a real honor to have him spend time and attention on this, and let's hope that his efforts and the efforts of others around the world are going to move this project finally to the place where we want to see, where we start playing indictment bingo and prosecution success and incarceration restitution for the many scoundrels who made the wrong decisions looking at this charity fraud rather than exposing it when they could have almost 15 years ago, or more than that. They
Right.
chose to play along. And so we need to get to the bottom of what really did happen, and we need to apply maximum pressure against this fraud conspiracy and push people who are expendable to stand up, sing, and get on the right side of history.
Yeah. Here's two guys that are expendable.
Exactly.
Could be close to be running out of town. So, Charles, do we have any more slide material to go through?
No, we don't, Jason. This is
Okay. Well, it was an excellent presentation with Michael Smith. I really liked the fact that he made a point. I didn't say anything to him about being in Thailand, broadband, anything like that. But he made a point of saying that, isn't it amazing that the Thai authorities have installed high-speed broadband even in as far-flung a remote location as wherever he was. A little over a year ago, Jake Morphonios insulted, demeaned, and lied about John Cullen, saying that his story was not plausible because he was in Thailand uploading videos. Jake said this is like being in Africa in a hut, and there we saw a guy in a hut with high-speed broadband. I like it.
Yeah, it was a hut I wouldn't mind visiting. I mean, it seemed like
Look cool, yeah.
nice location. Wouldn't want to be there.
Great in Thailand.
Oh, I'm sure. I wouldn't want to be in Thailand in tsunami season, but
No.
because that hut will last about a nanosecond in any kind of serious wave. But
I don't think I want to be anywhere during tsunami season, Charles. Tsunamis are not very enjoyable, but this has been a very enjoyable episode. I want to thank all the people who've been watching us. We're on a totally new system here, so I'm just getting like chatting and everything worked out. I think people have noticed that I do believe I have figured out and solved the chattering sound problem, and it should be in the rearview mirror. We have just listen for a second, totally silent background. So that's good. And people can listen to us on the audio-only podcasts on iTunes, on Spotify, on iHeartRadio. That's pretty good.
it's well done, Jason. Very well done, and a treat to do this with you. And I think the week ahead is certain to be one filled with massive moves in the stock market, perhaps up at first and then down or whatever. This is going to be an event-filled month, I think, March 2020.
Absolutely. And you know, being the first of the month, Charles, it's a great time now for people who watch Crowdsource the Truth to become sponsors. Even if you only watch the free shows like Sunday with Charles, it's really important that you become a sponsor. I can't keep doing this show without your sponsorship. And I think people can appreciate the ways that I'm trying to expand the scope, the travel that we're doing, the higher resolution, the better bit rate, the better audio. There are some changes here in the studio that people can't see that are facilitating some of these things, but it can't be done without your sponsorship. So please go to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. Become a sponsor. You can access the huge library of sponsor exclusive content for as little as $2 a month. There's some tiered benefits that people get. If you go to $5 a month, you're getting Discord. $10 a month, you get the amazing Sunday with Charles screensaver. At $25 a month, it's a lot, I know, but after 3 months of $25 sponsorship, people get the exclusive Robert Mueller Nothing Burger mug, and that's the only way to get it now. So really appreciate our sponsors, and I'm working on an incredible limited edition signed thing that will be an exclusive gift to the top tier sponsors. I'll be making an announcement about that very soon. So I want to thank everybody for sponsoring the show and for watching. Have a great evening. I'll see everybody tomorrow.